What you do in the first 12 months of playing the game can have a huge influence on how your game and your swing continues to develop into the future. These then are the top 3 kind of fundamental concepts that I think you need to be working on. Golf is quite a difficult game, you may have noticed, and if you haven't got these bits right, it can be a real uphill struggle. I'm assuming that you've had a go at the game and this isn't your very first session. If you want to have a look at how a very first session should look and the sort of things that you want to be trying to do in those kind of first 3 or 4 goes, then that's linked down below. Moving on then, so you've played a little bit, you've had a go at the range, and now you want to kind of build some technique into your game. These are the important patterns. Now the first one isn't so much a drill or technique as such, but a really kind of core fundamental concept that we need to adhere to. If you don't have this understanding under your belt, then you can completely go in the wrong direction. So here's how it works. First of all, we need to understand that the general motion of the club, and that is quite simply that the club head, as we make our swing, the club head makes a wide and flowing circular arc. If I show you there with one hand, you can see how the club head is flowing around me in that lovely circular pattern, and it's a really wide circle, and it's a flowing circle. So that in itself is powerful. Just understanding that we're trying to make this wide and flowing circle will really help you coordinate your body in a way that kind of leads to that. But that's not the important bit. The really kind of crucial part is, as we're moving the club around that circle, do we want to be striking the ball on the upwards part of the circle, the downwards part of the circle, or just clipping it at the bottom? So looking here at a good friend of mine who played the tour, you can see here quite clearly that club head is still moving down as it strikes the ball, and then of course we get the divot after the ball. So you can see there with this indication here that the bottom of the arc is some way past the ball, about 4 inches for really good players. So, left to our own devices, I think most of us would intuitively put the ball on a tee and try and kind of get under the ball and swoosh it up into the air, to get the ball launched into the air. And if that is in the kind of back of your mind as your kind of concept of how we strike the ball, then that is going to lead to a pattern where we are constantly on the back foot, we're overly wristy, really kind of leading to really sloppy wrist and arm motions through the ball, and occasionally kind of striking a decent ball off the tee. But all too often, we're going to end up with that situation where the club head is bottoming out too early, which means it then kind of tilts back and strikes the ball either on the top or possibly strikes the ground too early. So oftentimes top shots and fat shots are part of the same kind of misunderstanding that we need to try and get under it and lift it, as opposed to that video we saw there with David where the club was leaning forwards, it's still moving down, strikes the ball, and there's our divot, past the ball, having struck it. So the difference there is huge. If a player thinks we need to get underneath the ball to kind of lift it, we end up developing a swing which kind of looks like this. It's off balance, we're leaning back. Whereas if we're happy in the idea, we've made peace with the idea that the loft is going to lift the ball, and we're striking down and through and moving forwards, well, that is fundamentally a different movement, and those two players are going to be developing in entirely different trajectories. So then, how do we get better at the club striking the ball while it's moving down? Well, I mean, there's a lot of skill involved. I mean, whatever we do technically, you have to pay your rep tax, you have to put in the reps, put in the time, and build some skill. But the technical parts are relatively simple. When a club is moving down, it's leaning forwards because the club kind of rotates like this throughout the swing. If it's still leaning forwards, then it's also going to be moving down. So if I can have the club coming into the ball with the handle forwards of the head and my weight on my front foot, assuming the ball is in the right place in your stance, then we're going to have that lovely situation where we strike ball first, then divot. And principle 2 is the body motion. So we know in the golf swing, as we swing the club back, there's a big turning motion of the body, and then as we drive through, we're going to turn right the way through, stand up, and lift that back foot completely up off the ground. So we need to learn to create that body pivot. So here's the simple drill I'm sure you would have seen elsewhere. Let's see if we can do this and cover some kind of important extra concepts at the same time. So the basic drill is to stand up tall, club across your shoulders with your arms crossed. Just got to mind my microphone there. Okay, and in it, I would do it in this order. So I would start just by standing tall, makes the whole thing easier, and then we'll go to, let's call it level 2, where we tilt over. So first of all, we're just learning to get that pivot. So backswing wise, we're trying to turn the rib cage, so you can see that my shoulders have turned 90 degrees to the ball, if you like. Meanwhile, my hips have turned about half of that amount. Now, the crucial thing here is when you do that, is that you're still connected to the floor in that right foot on the 3 key pressure points. And those 3 pressure points are going to be, if that's your foot, the big toe, the little toe, and the heel. So as we're making that turn, we're not kind of rolling out onto the outside, which is a common mistake, and that will really affect your motion all the way up through into your upper body and your arms, believe it or not. So we've got that 90-degree turn back, keeping your head relatively centered. It is allowed to move a little bit, and I would suggest it probably needs to move a little bit. The weight's on the right leg, and then you're going to move the weight onto the left leg and turn all the way through, picking that back foot up, right up onto tiptoe. Then if you can see that there, right onto tiptoe. And that is important, we don't leave that behind, because that is allowing the pelvis to move all the way forwards and be pushed up over the front of the laces of the front foot. So as I'm turning through, I am also standing up quite straight-legged in the front foot with that back foot right up on tiptoe and the back knee kind of coming in to meet the front knee. If only it was that easy. And if the ball was played at chest height, it would be that easy. But of course, golf is played on the ground, so we need to do all of that with some tilt. So your golf posture then. Incidentally, we haven't covered grip and posture in this video. I mean, there's plenty of information out there. I've got a brilliant video, grip video below, and there's also a nice posture one as well. So I won't go into the details of posture, but we're hinged forwards from the hips, nice straight back, knees are flexed. So from here, I need to be able to make that turning motion while staying tilted in my spine, and that's going to mean, as I turn back, my lead shoulder is lower than my trail shoulder, so you can see the club is pointing down. I'll come back to impact, still in my golf posture, and then only afterwards can I turn through and stand up at the end. So essentially, I'm trying to turn while keeping this kind of tilt in my spine. Now, while you're doing that, something that really makes it easier is to understand how the legs are working in the pattern. So as you're turning, there's a little bit of this going on with the legs. Ideally, it's not like we just turn like so. You can see how my kind of knees are moving to the side and my feet are slopping around. There's actually more of a walking pattern, so a bit like a walking gait, and also an up and down pattern. So you can see as I'm turning there, I'm actually kind of bouncing up and down a little bit through my knees, and that's allowing the right side of my body to be extending upwards. So this hip gets higher, the right leg gets a little bit straighter into the backswing, and that also gets my hip behind me. And then in the downswing, there'll be a little drop into my knees as I turn through. So being able to kind of incorporate that sense of walking and a little bit of vertical motion. Incidentally, we go into that in a lot more detail in later videos. That can really kind of help that body pivot. So I'll do it from this angle. So as I turn back, trying to stay in posture, I am raising this right hip a little bit higher and moving it back behind me. And then I'm going to drop the hip down, turn through and stand up. And without that understanding, it's very easy to get into patterns of either trying to hold our legs too stiff to try and hold the stability, or potentially just sort of turning through the ankles and the knees and getting this kind of motion, in an effort to turn. So it's a body turn, staying in posture while allowing the knees to go forwards and backwards, and that right hip to move upwards and then downwards through the motion. And just a quick note on that, one of your biggest skills as a golfer in learning these patterns is to be able to take what are quite complicated patterns and relatively involved drills, and then be able to take them to the ball to the ball without being hugely overloaded, and that is a big skill. So we do our drills away from the ball, kind of we do all our patterns in front of the mirror, etc. But when it comes to hitting the ball, I mean, there is no way you can hit while thinking about the hip and the foot and the rib cage and the up and the down. Oh my goodness, you'd be an absolute mess. And in a live lesson, the coach and the player are constantly managing that space. And I think on YouTube that kind of gets lost a little bit. So it's your skill to be able to take our drills, and then when it comes to practice, and this is partly about doing your reps, we need to turn all that information into one or two very simple fields. So what is something I ask my students a lot is, what is the one thought that would take all that information and give us kind of 80% of it without all that cognitive load? So it might be a sense of, oh, I can feel my right hip moving back, or my left shoulder is under my chin, something that you know is going to give you most of that effect when you hit. So that's the body motion then. What about the arms? I mean, a golf swing that's really well put together and has that amazing flow and balance and transfer of energy is a combination of moving the body well and also moving the hands and arms. And crucial to that is the arm structure and also how you use the wrists. So in that first year, it is crucial that we learn to create the arm structure in the backswing, which is what we refer to as the L shape. So that's the lead arm straight, and the wrists have hinged, so I've got about 90 degrees between that lead arm and the club. So when we talk about wrist hinge, that is the up and down motion like so, without excessive kind of backwards hinge this way. So I've got my L shape in the backswing, lead arm is straight, right arm is bent but not pulled in. We need that structure, and then we're going to pull down and swoosh the energy of the club, and we're looking for, midway through the follow through, a similar kind of reverse L shape. So the wrists have rehinged and that trail arm is now straight, lead arm bent. So we have what is referred to as the L to L motion, which is an age-old pattern to really help us develop transfer of energy, speed and swoosh. So that's kind of midway through the follow through. What goes on then after that is we slow the club down behind our head and continue turning. But it's important that we are going through that L to L pattern, on that journey. Now, it's not just about nailing the arm shape, because we can all do that. It's actually about being able to connect to the weight of the club in a way that we can pull on the club, speed the head up through the ball and generate some kind of swoosh and momentum. And to help you do that, I would recommend one of these little weights that goes on the end of the club. This is probably my most used tool. Costs about £4.50 on the internet. So certainly with kind of beginners and high handicaps, I would use this a lot, and it just slips on the end of the club, and you can really then start to feel how that L to L pattern starts to create flow and swoosh and momentum, as opposed to, the alternative to that is overly controlling the club, being too steery through the ball, and not allowing that incredible sense of acceleration as the club swooshes past you and the arms turn over. So there we go. Those are the three absolute must. Do not pass go. Do not collect £200 before you get those patterns right. And once you've got those under your belt, things are going to get easier. But as we said, it's a difficult game, and in that first year there's going to be a whole lot of missed strikes. You cannot learn this game without a lot of top stuffs, misses, shanks, etc. So to help you kind of navigate that space of missed strikes, I've done another video down below that helps us with drills specifically to improve that strike while we're kind of learning those fundamental patterns. So until I see you next time, enjoy that journey. Good luck, play well.